Hello, friends. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 terrifying stories. And if you think they're just made up, you're deeply mistaken. Every story on this channel is connected, in one way or another, to real people who shared them with me. And I'll be telling each one in the first person, exactly as I heard it. So sit back, get comfortable, and listen closely, because this is going to be scary. I don't usually scare easily. I've done long-haul drives all over the US, slept in my car more times than I care to admit, and walked into some downright sketchy gas stations at 3 in the morning. But nothing in those years prepared me for what happened that night in New Mexico. It was fall of 2017. I was driving west on I-40, trying to make it from Oklahoma City to Flagstaff in one shot. Not the smartest idea, but I was 24, fueled by energy drinks and bad judgment. Around 2 a.m., I started losing the battle with the road. The yellow lines felt like they were breathing, expanding and shrinking with each blink. I knew I'd have to pull off before I drifted into a guardrail. The blue sign appeared like a blessing. Rest area, 1 mile. When I pulled in, the place looked off. Too quiet, even for 2 a.m. Usually, you see a few semis parked with their engines humming, maybe 1 or 2 cars with people sleeping inside. But that night, there was just me. My little Honda was the only car under the orange sodium lamps, throwing lonely shadows across the cracked pavement. The building itself was a squat brick structure, the kind built in the 70s. Windows dark, lights buzzing. A flagpole rattled in the steady desert wind. I sat for a moment with the engine still running, listening. Nothing, just wind and the faint tick of my cooling engine. I told myself I was being dramatic. Grab the bathroom, splash cold water on my face, get back on the road. Simple. I stepped inside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, giving everything that sickly green tint. The lobby was empty, except for a bulletin board covered in sun-faded flyers. Hiking trails, community events, a missing person poster that looked decades old. A vending machine stood in the corner, chaff-lit, its display frozen on $1.25. I went into the men's room. The first thing I noticed was the smell, not the usual bleach and faint urine combo, but something metallic, like old pennies. I tried to ignore it, but it got stronger the deeper in I went. The mirrors were spotless, which was weird. Rest stop mirrors are never spotless. I took care of business quickly, splashed some water on my face, and glanced up. That's when I froze. Someone was standing at the far end of the restroom. He was tall, over 6 feet, thin, wearing a dark jacket with the hood pulled up. His face was shadowed, but I could see the pale outline of his jaw. He was just standing there. No stall door had opened, no footsteps. 1 second the room was empty. The next, he was there. Sorry man, I muttered, forcing a laugh. My voice echoed too loudly. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood perfectly still. Every instinct in me screamed to get out. I dried my hands half-heartedly and walked toward the exit, keeping him in my peripheral vision. He didn't move, didn't even twitch. When I pushed the door open, I finally glanced back. He was closer. Not by much, maybe 2 steps forward, but I swear to God, I hadn't heard him move. The metallic smell was stronger now, sharp, in the back of my throat. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted into the lobby, heart hammering. The lobby looked different, subtly, but enough to make my stomach drop. The flyers on the bulletin board were gone. The vending machine's light was completely off now, like it had never been plugged in. And outside, through the glass doors, I saw my car. But there was another vehicle parked 2 spaces over. A white van. I hadn't heard it pull in. I pushed through the doors, fumbling my keys. The van's engine wasn't running, but I could see movement behind the windshield. A figure in the driver's seat, just sitting there, watching me. I forced myself not to sprint, trying to look casual as I approached my car. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my keys once. I bent to grab them, and when I looked up again, the man from the restroom was outside, standing under the light near the building, about 50 feet away, perfectly still. I got in my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. My headlights swept across the lot and caught him staring right at me. His hood had slipped back just enough for me to see his face. Pale, expressionless, eyes too wide, like he was waiting for something. The van's headlights flicked on. That broke me. I threw the car into reverse, nearly hit the trash can behind me, then sped toward the exit ramp. In my rearview mirror, both the van and the man stayed in the lot. Neither moved. By the time I hit 80 on the interstate, my hands were still shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel straight. I drove another 2 hours before stopping again, this time at a busy truck stop, where the sound of diesel engines was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. The next day, in the safety of daylight, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the man was just another traveler. Maybe the van had been there the whole time, and I'd been too tired to notice. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after 20 hours awake. But here's the thing that still keeps me up sometimes. 2 weeks later, scrolling through local news online, I saw a headline. Unidentified man found dead at I-40 rest stop. Same town, same exit. The article said he'd been discovered in the restroom. No ID, no vehicle, just a description. Tall, thin, dark jacket. They never identified him. And I know, deep down, that if I'd hesitated even a little longer that night, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. You rented a place just because it was suspiciously cheap. Sometimes there's a reason behind that low price. One you'd rather not discover. And if you've never had the feeling that you're not alone in your own home, listen closely to this story. I'd just moved to Houston for a new job, and like most 20-somethings, I was hunting for the cheapest possible place that wasn't infested with roaches or overrun with college kids throwing keg parties. That's how I ended up at the Elms on Westheimer, a tired beige high-rise built in the early 70s, the kind of building that looked like it had once been luxury apartments, but had since settled into being cheap enough if you don't ask too many questions. The rent was almost suspiciously low, just under $600 a month for a studio on the 13th floor. The manager, a thin man in his late 50s named Mr. Hanley, had smiled a little too brightly when I signed the lease. "You'll have a nice view of downtown," he'd said, tapping the paper with a nicotine-stained finger. "Not many people take the 13th floor." I'd laughed. Because of superstition? He didn't laugh back. He just slid the keys across the desk. At first, everything seemed fine. The elevator was old but functional. The plumbing rattled but worked, and the apartment itself was just a simple shoebox. One room, a bathroom, and a kitchenette. The balcony overlooked the sprawl of Houston, neon signs glowing like dying stars in the humid haze. The first night, I slept like a rock. The second night, though, I woke up at exactly 1:13 a.m. to the sound of the elevator dinging down the hall. I thought nothing of it. People come and go at all hours in a city. But then I heard wet footsteps on the carpet. Slow, deliberate, squishing with each step. They stopped right outside my door. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I waited. Nothing. No knock, no voice, just silence. After a few minutes, I convinced myself I'd imagined it and fell back asleep. On the third night, it happened again. 1:13 a.m. sharp. The elevator ding. The wet footsteps. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. I slid out of bed, crept to the peephole, and looked. A woman stood there. She was tall, her hair plastered to her face as though she'd just climbed out of a river. Her dress clung to her like it had been soaked for hours. Water dripped steadily onto the carpet, leaving a dark trail behind her, and her face, her skin was pale, her lips bluish, and her eyes fixed straight ahead with an intensity that made my stomach flip. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even looking at my door. She was staring down the hallway. I held my breath, waiting for her to move. She took one step, then another. The squishing of her shoes faded as she walked further down the hall, but halfway down, she simply vanished. Not into an apartment, not into the elevator. She was just gone. The carpet was dry the next morning. The next day, I stopped by the office. "Hey," I said casually. "Do you know if anyone else lives on the 13th floor?" Mr. Hanley's eyes flicked up from his paperwork. "Why?" "Just heard someone walking last night. Tall woman, long hair. Looked like she was wet." His face froze. For a split second, I swear I saw something like fear cross it. Then he forced a smile. "You probably saw a visitor. People come and go. But she disappeared," I pressed. Hanley's smile tightened. "This is Houston. People disappear all the time." And with that, he returned to his papers. Conversation over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the sound of those wet footsteps. So I decided to investigate. I stepped out into the hallway just after midnight and waited near the elevator. Sure enough, at 1:13 a.m., the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and the woman stepped out again, dripping, staring straight ahead. I ducked behind the corner as she walked. She passed me, squishing toward the end of the hall. I followed at a distance, my bare feet silent against the carpet. Halfway down, she turned left into an apartment door. The number on it read 1313. My stomach dropped. My lease clearly said apartment 1313, but I lived at the very end of the hall on the right. My door was 1312. The door she'd walked into shouldn't exist. And when I walked down to check in the morning, it didn't. The hall ended at 1312. The door to 1313 was gone. I tore through my lease that evening. On the front page, it listed, tenant, my name, apartment number 1313. But when I flipped to the second page, the page that should have had the detailed floor plan and addendums, it was missing. Torn out cleanly. I went back to the office the next day. "Hey Hanley," I said, holding up the lease. "This says I live in 1313, but that apartment doesn't exist." His face paled. "You live in 1312. Then why does this say 1313? "Clerical error," he muttered quickly, snatching the paper from me. He shoved it into a drawer. "You live in 1312. That's all that matters." Something in his voice told me not to push it further. A week later, the footsteps came again. By now, I was too terrified to check the peephole, so I just lay in bed, frozen. But then I heard it. My doorknob turning, slowly, left, then right, testing the lock. I scrambled out of bed and pressed my weight against the door, even though the deadbolt was already secure. I could feel cold seeping through the wood, like the door itself was sweating. And then, clear as day, a woman's voice whispered through the crack. "You shouldn't be here." The doorknob went still. Silence. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. No wet footprints, no dripping water. Just silence. The next morning, I packed up everything I could carry and moved into a cheap motel down the street. I never went back. A month later, I checked the Houston Chronicle archives at the library. Buried in an article from 1973, I found it. Woman found dead in bathtub, 13th floor of the Elms Apartments. Her name was Marissa Clark, 27 years old, drowned in her own apartment. The number? 1313. The building sealed the unit after her death, converted the floor plan so that 1313 didn't exist anymore. But it does, at least at 1:13 a.m. And every so often, I wonder what would have happened if I'd ever opened that door. You know, some stories stick with you because they mess with something we all take for granted. Like home. You think your apartment is safe, predictable, just walls and neighbors living their lives. But what if one day you realize the noises you hear shouldn't even exist? Here's a story that kept me awake for nights. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Houston back in 2016. It wasn't much, but it was cheap, and after a bad breakup, cheap was exactly what I needed. The complex wasn't new. Faded paint, buzzing lights in the hallway, and a smell of damp carpet that never went away. But it was quiet, and quiet was priceless to me. I lived on the top floor, the fourth, which I actually liked. No one stomping a buzzny. No late-night vacuuming. No kids bouncing balls. The first couple weeks were uneventful, just the usual routine. Work, sleep, Netflix, repeat. Then one night, lying in bed, I heard it. Footsteps above me. Slow, heavy steps. Pacing. I remember sitting up, confused. My apartment was the top floor. The roof was right above me. At first, I told myself it was just the building settling. Maybe pipes knocking, or an echo from another hallway. But the steps were deliberate. Heel, toe, moving back and forth, then stopping directly above my bedroom. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like an hour, waiting. Eventually, I fell asleep, convincing myself it was nothing. The next morning, I asked the property manager casually, "Hey, is there any kind of attic or maintenance crawl space above my unit?" She looked at me strangely and shook her head. "No, you're right under the roof. Nothing up there." That answer should have eased my mind. Instead, it made the footsteps worse. They didn't happen every night, but often enough that I started dreading bedtime. Sometimes it was pacing. Sometimes it was dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor or ceiling. Once, around 3 a.m., I swear I heard a muffled thud, like a chair tipping over. I actually got out of bed and checked every corner of my apartment, even opened my front door, staring down the dimly lit hall, but everything was normal, silent. It escalated about a month in. I woke up to the sound of something rolling above me. At first, I thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear. Then came 3 loud bangs in a row, shaking my ceiling light. I grabbed a broom and banged back, shouting, "Cut it out!" The footsteps stopped immediately. For the first time, I felt like whatever was up there had been listening. The next day, I knocked on my neighbor's door across the hall. She was a middle-aged woman, kind but quiet. When I asked if she ever heard noises above her unit, her face went pale. She told me, in a low voice, "Don't talk about it. Just don't." Then she closed the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., the pacing started again, but this time it was faster, almost frantic, back and forth, right above me. Then silence. And then 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. Right above my bed. I froze, clutching the blanket, staring at the ceiling. My mouth went dry. The knocks came again, louder, like something or someone was signaling me. I finally snapped, grabbed my phone, and called the emergency maintenance number. A groggy man showed up about 30 minutes later with a ladder. He looked annoyed, but agreed to check the roof. I stood in the parking lot as he climbed up under the Texas night sky. After a while, his flashlight beam swept across the shingles. He called down, "Nothing up here. Solid roof." No signs of animals either. When he came back down, he gave me a strange look. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" But I wasn't. A week later, I woke up again to silence. Too silent. No hum from the fridge, no buzz from the hallway lights outside, no distant traffic. Just silence. And in that silence, I heard breathing. Not mine. Deep, steady breathing, coming from just above me. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag that night and left, crashing on a coworker's couch. The next day, I gave my notice to the management, losing my deposit without a fight. Before I left, curiosity got the better of me. I stopped by the office to drop off my keys, and as casually as I could, asked if anyone had ever complained about noises in my unit. The property manager sighed, then leaned closer. "You're not the first, but let me give you some advice. Don't go digging. Some things in this building are better left alone." I never looked back. But even now, years later, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night, listening, wondering if wherever I move, the footsteps will follow.